First, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming. Also like to put a big thanks out there to the Midwest.io staff, the crew putting that together, as well as just the video technical crew. Been doing a really awesome job for you guys as well as the speakers too. So this is my talk, and that probably can tell is my Twitter handle. It's also in the schedule, so don't worry about needing to jot that down. And this is a giant QR code because I think that we should really try to keep these alive. But if you want, you can also just use the URL above it. That'll take you to my slides. It's tinycc/mwio-browser-tools. So that'll link to this slideshow, and then also to all the content here, as well as to the repo that I'll be talking about, some things like that. So feel free to follow along if you want to, but otherwise, interrupt me with questions as long as time permits. I'm fine with answering those along the way. And any feedback is greatly appreciated. I know there's a rating in the guidebook app. I don't know if we actually will see those or not. But otherwise, you can just talk to me afterwards. Tweet at me, file a GitHub issue if that makes sense. So here's the title again. Little generic wording here, so we'll elaborate and kind of break down what I'm talking about here. So what are we doing? We're writing, we're creating. What are we creating? We're creating tools, some utility to help us accomplish specific tasks. These tools are custom. They're tailored to us. They're specific to the needs of our web app. They're in browser, so they live right alongside our web apps, not in some separate environment. And they're for smarter web app development, which is just kind of a blanket for making it faster, easier to develop, design, test, support all the different aspects of our web app. So it's crystal clear now, right? We can just dive into some code? No? Maybe not? OK. So instead, I'll just show you, just jump to an example real quick of what sorts of tools it really is that I'm talking about. Save me some words and hopefully save you some confusion. But first, we need a little bit of context. So I work at Huddle, sports video software company. This is a page that a lot of our users see as like a football coach looking at their game footage, something like that. Very YouTube-esque, playlists on the right, clips on the bottom, a video player in the middle. But playlists and the clips that they contain are a very important data object, business entity for Huddle. If we're diagnosing some issues that a coach is having, they see this playlist and they say, hey, there's something wrong with the video on here. We need to check it out. We need to know what sort of, the underlying data is, maybe the URL to the video, some additional information about it. So we want to connect those things. So right now, you have the browser tools, the Chrome DevTools, and this will show me some cool stuff. I can look at the actual HTML. Please don't look too closely at it. But can look at the actual HTML, but that's not really what I'm interested in when I'm doing an issue, looking into an issue like this. I'm not writing the page. I want to get to the data behind it. So enter custom browser tools. So you might have noticed the Huddle tab in the DevTools panel. And so we're going to bring up our own little custom inspect tool. And so what happens when we use that? So we can click Start an Inspection, and then important items on the page you can see are being highlighted. These are sort of those business entities. And if we click on one of them, a playlist here, then we have more data about that playlist, also about some of its sort of parent objects. And this is selectable. But more importantly, for common items such as a playlist, we actually have links to take us to our admin page, employee usage, and have a specific page for each playlist that gives us a more in-depth info and troubleshooting without having to go to the database, that sort of thing. So it's really that connection between the page and links and getting more information out of it. So it's kind of cool, right? So another smaller little bit that we can look at is this pop-up here. And this is really basic, but just showing sort of a quick access approach to some other information. So here we can go to the logged in users page. So imagine that we are logged in as someone else, not myself. we can jump to their page in our admin site as well, or jump to the team that they're logged in as, go to that page too. And yeah, that's me holding a koala. So essentially, brief summary, like that's sort of what we're talking about. Tools that are living right within your web app that have features custom built to help you develop, debug, support all those aspects of your web app. So there's a lot more that we can do, but at least I think that's kind of cool. If you don't think so, you can go next door and still catch most of Alyssa's talk on reverse engineering. I won't really be angry. I might be a little disappointed, but if you stay, this is what I sort of want you to get out of it. I have 4 takeaways, so you have a lot to take with you, but they're pretty simple. The first is just realizing a need. So I want to help you sort of identify if you have some problems like this that in your own app that you could benefit from some of these browser tools by implementing them. Then just want to sort of make you think about that, and then hopefully inspire you to actually work towards a solution if you don't have one. Just take that first step. Something is better than nothing. And then hopefully I can give you a little bit of a head start with the code itself. I have a public GitHub repo that I'll get to in a second, and if you choose to dare try using it, then that might help you get things rolling, or at least give you some ideas. And then last, just want you to imagine the possibilities. Very, very lofty here. But I'll give you some ideas of other types of things that you could do with these tools. And then just sort of stick in your mind as you're working on something. Maybe you come across something you think, oh, that'd be really cool if I could just know this about my page. And then you go, oh, cool, I could add that, expose that through these browser tools, that sort of a thing. So why would you want to do this? What sort of needs do you have? So the exact needs are hard for me to answer because they're specific to you. But I'll just revisit my example, and maybe that'll help trigger some thoughts. So back to the huddle example. The core problem really here that we were trying to solve is connecting some chunk of UI that the coach sees to more data. The information in this case is actually not a lot was actually displayed, but it's all in the page. In this case, it was actually in the markup, but it could be in JavaScript. But it's not very easy to get to. And for good reason, because the page normally is for the coach experience, our end user experience. It's not normally dedicated to supporting and developing. We kind of do that on the back end, or with other tools. So the information was already there, but manually parsing and finding that information was at least annoying. And for someone just starting on our support team, stuff like that could be kind of difficult. Another thing to learn. So if they don't have to, then why not make them, or why make them? So really, we just wanted to expose that information. So we did have another solution for this that's dated back 6 or 7 years. Very simple. If you wanted to see more information about CutUp, specifically the ID CutUp playlist, you just tack on this URL parameter, debug equals 1. And then when you reload the page, each playlist, each presentation, report, all these items, when you hovered over them, would have a tooltip, and that tooltip has an ID in it. So that was useful. Definitely got us 5 years or so. And it exposed the ID. That was the important part. It's helpful, but we could definitely do better. So now this sort of creates new problems. Again, going back to someone that's starting on support, they have to learn to put debug equals 1 in the URL, which isn't that hard, but especially if you don't really know URL structures and aren't familiar with the syntax, it's kind of a weird looking thing. Second, you have to refresh the page, which in this case is pretty trivial, but especially if you have a single page app and you're kind of in a few steps and then you go to refresh and you have to start back at the beginning. Something like this isn't really that useful. But probably one of the biggest things is that because this is just a tooltip, there's not a whole lot you can do with it besides look at it. So you can't select it. You can't copy paste the ID. You have to remember it, write it down, pop open some other window and type it before it closes in Chrome, something like that. And there's no sort of linking or anything like you sort of saw on the current example, the current solution. So you'd have to plug that into a search page or somehow look up, do something with that ID. So essentially what we wanted was a richer UI something a little bit easier to view. And so this is a specific example, but I feel like this is sort of a common problem that some people might have, so one thing that might be useful. But if not, just keep thinking about more ways that you could use these. So looking at this original solution, like we knew it could be better, but how to derive from that solution to the one I just showed you before. And so I just want to briefly walk through that process and sort of the decisions made along the way, more or less to sort of justify the choices so you're not just blindly believing that this is the best way, or at least that I think is the best way. So I took on this challenge to create a better solution as just like a side project. And so the first prototype I had was pretty basic. And so here, just like a little palette that's being put over the video player. You can see it has a little bit richer UI. It has multiple items that you can actually select the text, still have that link for the playlists themselves. So that's some good functionality there. But there's still some drawbacks. The UI is definitely intrusive. And in this page, it's a very specific case. And putting it over the video page or video player is OK, but not ideal. And because it's on the page, you have CSS cascading issues, especially on older pages. And so I have to be very careful about how things are styled and things like that. But most importantly, this is a very specific use case. And if you wanted to add more to it, it'd be kind of awkward. It's not really set up for that. It's just sort of one specific case here. So I started seeing the need for, if we want to add more and more features, that we need a little more generic type of place to house them. And so a little while later, like I said, it was a side project, so some time passed. But I started getting interested in Chrome extension development and thought that might be a good way to sort of house these tools. So if you dissect a Chrome extension, what does it really give you? It gives you, most notably, probably a pop-up, which can be triggered by a button either in the Omnibox or in the toolbar beside it. But perfect, we have a place for some tools. One, probably lesser known area, unless you, use like the PageSpeed extension or like Backbone or React extensions, is you can actually add an entire panel to the DevTools, which is pretty cool because that gives us way more space for tools. And so there's just so much room for tools at that point. Some additional components of the Chrome extension, non-visual components, are some page interaction via the content scripts that actually live on the page, so you can manipulate the DOM and work with things there. And then there's also this concept of a background page, which is sort of always running. It's just in the background, but it can help us sort of tie things together. So essentially, with the Chrome extension, went down that route. And the implementation, roughly looks like this. But basically, you have some what I'd call the content pages, your pop-up and your DevTools panel. And they're talking to each other, and then with this on-page script, all via a messaging API, which is just something custom for this, but it's backed by the Chrome messaging API that's exposed by the extensions. So sweet, we found the silver bullet. We're good to go, right? Well, not quite. So it really needs to work for everyone to make this a useful tool. At least that's what was my thought. So this means all employees. Most developers and regular employees at Huddle use Chrome, but not all. We have a decent IE Edge group. And so we really want it to be usable by everyone all the time. But even for our Chrome users, they would still have to install that extension, which is really easy, but it's still a barrier to adoption. And not only does it need to work for everyone, but we want it to work everywhere. So if one person hasn't installed and they go to help someone on another machine and it's not installed there, then it's kind of frustrating. Like the DevTools are available everywhere, and that's really cool. You can just use them whether or not someone even knows they're on their computer. So we want it to be able to go to different machines and have the tools available for them. The other thing, though, is if we're troubleshooting an issue that's specific to a coach's machine, either like a network issue or just something weird, we might do a remote session and be on their computer. And in that case, we really don't want to install more stuff on their computer if we don't have to. So if it's already available without installing an extension, that'd be pretty cool. So I decided that we need a fallback for this to really be successful. So started thinking, and what sort of crazy new technology could we use to make this work everywhere? Iframes. So if you think about it, Chrome extension is really just a bunch of pages. They're rectangular. So are iframes. Both hold HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Cool. Iframes also work in every browser. There's no special tools. So kind of handy. So why not just mimic sort of this Chrome extension behavior, but use iframes to do it? It's actually turned out not to be very hard. We have an iframe at the bottom that's resizable. Just add some padding on the body so that you can still see everything. It's not covering things up. The slightly trickier part is the pop-up, because you can't add something to the Omnibox or the toolbar within the page. So instead, you just have a little icon that can drag around so it doesn't get in the way and goes translucent when you're not hovering over it. So trying to be not very intrusive, but still have that same quick ability to click on it and pop it up. And then, so you still have the same sort of concept of some sort of on-page scripts. And then the main difference is that the script that connects this all together doesn't live on a background page. It lives on the page itself. And then in this case, we're still using that same messaging API, but it's backed by like post message on the window instead of the actual Chrome message passing API. So if we have this iframe fallback, then do we really need to also have a Chrome extension? Well, short answer is no. We really don't need one. There's actually a few disadvantages to the Chrome extension. One is that kind of minor. Debugging is a little bit harder. Debugging the DevTools with the DevTools basically requires more windows open and can be a little interesting at times. It's pretty sandbox. You have to be careful about, not careful, but there's a lot of security restrictions. So sometimes you go to do something and then security is really tight, so you have to figure out a different way to do it. But we can get past that. But then one that's still kind of big is you can't use custom keyboard shortcuts. So to pull open the DevTools, your DevTools panel, you can't do that programmatically anyway. Chrome doesn't allow that. So you have to know how to open the DevTools and select that tab. Again, not really a big deal, but it could be nice if you could just click on the pop-up button and then click another button to pop up your panel in the DevTools, something like that. So some disadvantages, but there are still advantages that it has over the iframe. By default, Chrome and the DevTools are built to be popped out into another window without you doing anything special. So that's really nice if you have multiple monitors and you want to use that real estate while you're doing things. The pop-up doesn't interfere with the page at all in the case of the extension, so that's still nice. And then another big one is that there are additional browser APIs that the Chrome extension exposes for you. A couple of these include actual screen captures of the page, some file system access, so read and write, and more than just pulling in files through like a dialog. And then there's some other DevTool APIs too. So what do? We do both of them. And you might be asking, so wait, so you have a Chrome extension and an iframe fallback, so now you have two versions of these tools that we're going to maintain? Well, not exactly. So we have two wrappers, but they're going to be wrapping the same content. So the actual panel, the actual visual pieces live in one place. They actually live on your website. And then the Chrome extension is just loading that content and putting it in a nice frame for you, basically. And that's the same thing the iframe is doing, too. So a little more on that. So that actual content, the actual tools that you create specific to your site, those are living on your site. And this actually makes it really nice for things like versioning. If you are adding a feature that you need, you start passing a new message from the DevTools panel to the page, you have to start passing that, make changes on the DevTools panel code. You also have to make changes to your normal web app code. So if those go live together, that just makes more sense and makes it a little less of a coordination of deploying a new feature. So your prod versus test versus local, you can go to prod and have that production version of the tools running, and with the same Chrome extension installed, go to your test environment and have that version running, and go to your local environment and have that version running. So we still have the same wrapper, but depending on what page you're visiting, the version of the DevTools might vary a bit between environments. So just a quick comparison again. This is basically the diagram of what the Chrome extension version looks like, and the iframe fallback. Not very different, the main thing being that you don't have that background page. Everything's sort of coordinated on the page itself. Cool, so now that's about as far as I'll get is the understanding of actual how the internals of the code that I wrote at least works, and some justification. So now by this point, I'm sure you're just super pumped, and you want to use this on your own app. So I thought you had some code. Let's see it. Okay. So here's the repo, Shearer/browser tools template. So the goal of this is potentially to give you a starting point to build on, fork it and manipulate it, or if nothing else, just to browse through it, give you some ideas on how you could work with these things. The contents itself, there is a directory that you can load as a Chrome extension. You could also then publish it as an actual Chrome extension, but just for playing around in development, you can load it from that directory. And then there's the actual handful of JavaScript modules. So I'll go through what these are and how you use them, but basically there's a loader, and then there are a few connectors for the page itself, the pop-up, and the DevTools panel. So how would you go about actually adding these to your web app? So all the pieces are the pages themselves, the loader, connectors that I just mentioned, and then the actual tools, the features, all the fun stuff. So I'll go into a little more detail now. So the pages, first we have the actual web app. So this is what you already have. This is your website. But you need to add a couple content pages, the pop-up page and the DevTools panel page. So again, these are just normal pages, but we want them to live within your website. So the loader, there's a loader.js file that's one of the sort of artifacts from building the browser tools repo. And so this is actually included on all of your web app pages. So this is gets executed on every page on prod. So it's pretty minimal, but all it's really doing is checking to see if the browser or the Chrome extension is installed, and if it is, kind of get things going with that. Otherwise, listening for a specific keyboard shortcut, and that'll toggle the iframe fallback for you. So it has code for that, and then everything else it just lazy loads, because obviously you don't want a lot of extra code getting downloaded every time normal users are accessing your site. So then we have the connectors, and this is really how you just access the APIs that we're creating here. So it's similar to if you're working with a Chrome extension. There's a chrome.star, all the Chrome APIs. So here, this is our way of accessing those for these tools. And right now, it's basically just messaging is really the only thing under that. So the page connector is just a version that lives on your page itself. This is used by all of your web pages. Get into how you use it in just a second. And this one is actually lazy loaded as part of the loader, so you don't actually have to include this any special way. But you do have to include the connectors for the content pages. So there's pop-up connector.js, DevTools panel connector.js. And so those files you do need to load on those respective pages. And then that'll just give those pages access to talking to everything else. So then the tools, the features, all the fun stuff. So this is really the meat of it. It's extremely versatile because you do it all yourself. So you can use React and build some nice UI in a DevTools panel, or just use jQuery and throw some stuff together. Whatever you want, whatever suits your needs, because this is where you customize it. So, how's unintentional animations? So this sort of comes in two forms. You have the actual content in your content pages, like I showed before, and then you also have some points within your web app that you want to tie in and provide some integration. So, for example, on Huddle, we have the highlighting, so that has to actually happen on the page, And yeah, so that's a place that we are sort of tying into the actual app itself. So what does it actually look like in code? So I'm going to skip the sort of setup work. Basically, there's just a few snippets that you put on the page itself. You put on your pop-up page and your DevTools content pages, but those are all on the getting started on the repo, and they're pretty boring. So just a couple snippets. But what we're really interested is sort of how do you work with this when you're building those features. And this is pretty much focused around this messages API, which is just the initial sort of API that I've added here. So you can see a couple of methods, or the methods on this. Pretty standard-ish eventing, pub/sub type events here. We have messages.on, so you can listen for events, and these are just sort of broadcasted everywhere. So the naming really is how you do any sort of separation or namespacing type things you want to. But so you can listen for any events coming from somewhere else, from some other part of these tools. Then you can also trigger events to get listened to. And then you have a sort of request response capability here. So you can register a request handler with the handle request method. And then you can also make a request. So instead of just broadcasting out events, you can say, hey, I need something, and then asynchronously, somebody else hopefully will say, oh, I got it, or it'll time out after 5 seconds as our default here. So that's really about it. As far as like the interaction, the API, a lot of message passing between these different things. But there's a lot you can build on top of that. So here, I'll actually switch to demo quick if I can. Okay, so this is just the to-do MVC app. I'm sure it's very new to everyone. This is the React one, not a big deal, but not a big detail, but okay, you can see everything up there. So this is in the repo itself too. There's an examples directory, so all the code for this is online, so don't get too caught up in any of that. But basically just copied in the to-do MVC React project, and then added just minimal code to do just a couple pretty basic things, but we'll show you what they are. So first you might notice that it's really small on the screen, but there's my face up there. So that's just encouraging you to use your own icon for your Chrome extension, unless you want to keep seeing me every day. And my custom browser tools, nice little title there. So there's a couple customizations that I mentioned on the README as far as the actual extension itself, and then everything else is just built on top of the APIs. So super basic, but here's some content in a pop-up. More interesting is if we pop up the DevTools. See, we actually have a My Tools, really excited My Tools panel. It's something that's actually kind of cool. Recently, maybe in the last month or two, you can actually reorder these now. So before, your custom one will get shoved at the very end. And if you, especially if you had the tools on the right side of the page, then they'd kind of get lost. Or you'd have to click an arrow to show the rest of them and stuff. So you can actually just make yours high priority. Yeah, so what can we do here? Just added a couple things. Get to-dos. No. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure how to make that bigger. But it says get to-dos, track changes, and clear. So if I get to-dos, it just pulls the current list and prints it out. If I click, go ahead and clear that. If I click track changes, then as I add items, bread, or if I remove items, we just sort of have a log here. It says to do added, bread, to do removed, cheese. So pretty simple interaction, but still, this is actually tying into the app itself and the events that the model, the React model, is throwing. And if we want to do something crazy, we can add in some functionality to just throw an Easter egg or whatever we want. Cool. So again, pretty basic, but we'll take a look at what it actually takes to do that, which is not very much. All right, so this is the code that's been added to the app.jsx. So it's just sort of the main file that's loading the to-do MVC app. And this is actually, you don't have to look at this yet or like read it yet. This is the entirety of the on-page script besides the actual loader file that comes like bundled. This is the like custom script that we've added. Not very much. We're not doing very much either, but just saying that this is sort of all you need to add. So if we break it down, first we're pulling in the a reference to the loader. This is just a very basic example, so it's just using it as a global. It actually exports as a UMD, so you can use it as a global. You can use it as an AMD require, or as if you're using ES6, you can compile it in that way with an import. But you basically pull in that code. And then specifically on the page itself, there's this onloaded method. And so this is basically so you're not running some of this code every time the page is loaded. You're deferring it until either the Chrome extension detects that the Chrome extension has been installed, or that they do the keyboard shortcut and toggle these. So the code inside of here won't get run unless the inspector is being used. But when it is, then it passes in a reference to tools, which is just what I'm calling the page connector itself. So tools has all the APIs on it, all of the APIs being messages right now. But you can access that from tools.messages. And we want to, so we're subscribing. This is a React-specific thing. The model for the app has a subscribe function, or not React-specific, but this particular example specific. We're subscribing to any changes is all that's happening here. So whenever the model changes, it's triggering this callback. And all we're going to do is, through our messages API, we're going to trigger a to-dos updated event. And then we are going to pass it the list of all the current to-dos. So then additionally, we're also going to handle requests to just pull that current list. So we're broadcasting it whenever there are changes, but we also want to be able to request that list and return the current one. So in this case, we use that handle request method and calling, what are we requesting? We're requesting the current to-dos, so that's the name of it. And then we have, as arguments, we have the data in case you wanted to pass something extra. In this case, we're not using it. And then respond, which is just the callback. It's just makes it async. In this case, we just respond synchronously with the current list of to-dos. So that's all we add on the app side for like our integration tie-ins. On the DevTools panel side, we're pulling in the connector. Again, similar way. It could be through an import or something, or a normal require if you're using something else. But pull in that connector, create a new instance of it. In this case, we don't have to do the callback, the onloaded, because when you load the content pages, it's in the context of the tools, so you don't need to worry about. You just load everything right away. So once we have access to that messages, this is really simplified, but basically we're just using jQuery here with a reference to the Get To Dos button, and when we click that, we're going to make a request for the current list, and then when we get the result, just using a promise here, when we get that result, we're just going to do concatenate all the names, comma separated, and append those to our UI. So that's pretty simple. So then to cover the track changes, again, we're just listening for whenever you click that. Going to request the current to-do list, so we have a starting point, and we're going to save that, and then we're going to start listening for any updates. And then when we get an update, we're just going to run this diff to-dos, which just compares the two lists and tells you if some were added or some were removed. And then a log changes, which just formats that and spits it out. And then we're going to save the new list of to-dos as the previous one for any future diffing. So I guess any quick questions on that? That's pretty much all the code. A little simplified there, but pretty much all the code required to do those two pretty simple things. Any questions on that? Cool. So the last section here, just want to give you I've given you some ideas, some fairly similar, but some ideas here. So I'd like to give you a few more. So going with sort of the different disciplines here, a lot of this, there's a lot of things you can do in development. Also probably the longest list because I'm a developer, so I keep thinking of things that I want to add. So we already went over the entity inspections. You can also do things, and again, some of this is like being built into Chrome itself, but you might not have that in IE or Edge or Firefox or something else. So if you want some of these tools to be consistently available, you can add them yourself. So something like network throttling or filtering, like for AJAX calls, if you would overwrite the XML HTTP request object, you could do your own sort of manual throttling or something like that. Custom logging, if you create a logger module and you want to be thorough with your logging on the client, but you don't want to flood the actual console all the time, you could just have a logging pane in here and be able to set your own verbosity. I only want to show errors, or I only want to show warnings, or I only want to show from this particular logger that I've identified by name. For things like feature or experiment toggling or A/B testing, that sort of thing, if you don't want to, if it's a random A/B test, but you're trying to develop it and you want it to always be choosing a particular one, you could set a cookie or something like that. But instead of having to do that from the console or going to some page that triggers the cookie to be set, you could just have a little checkbox that handles that for you. So again, just making the interaction a little bit smoother. If you're doing globalization, you could do locale switching, again, either sort of cookie-based, or if you're using a framework that supports it, it could be dynamic, live, setting the locale of the current page, the current app. So design, this is a pretty short list, but mostly just because I have one example. And let me run through this quick. So this is something that I had prototyped. So this is on another page in Huddle, but we have the inspecting tool available here, but then we also have this particular page uses Backbone. So we have the ability to inspect the actual Backbone views, much like you would elements or the business type entities. So here we click on one of them, expand it up, and so instead of a hierarchy of elements like you'd have in the normal element chooser, we have a hierarchy of the views, so you could toggle up with the breadcrumb. We also have the source file. We're pulling that out and pulling out the template that's associated with the view so that we can edit it in a bit here. And then we're also printing out the model. So for the source file, if we click on it, we have it set up so that we just pull in an ACE editor. We pull in the file contents, just request them over AJAX, and so then we can edit them. Oops. Sorry about that. So here showing we can just use a tooltip to give a quick insight to the model itself, or if we click it, have it logged to the console, so just really quickly getting to that data. But if we go to the template, maybe we want to update this and do a live edit, see what things look like. So we have a number of plays down here. Maybe we want to put that up at the top. So we make some changes in the template. This is just the handlebars template. And get rid of the other one. And save, and this is just on the page. This was actually functioning, not something we put to prod, but as a prototype, just trigger some events. And this was a lot more involved on the side of the app itself, but just showing some of the more complicated types of things that you could do if you just tie into the right points. So a few things as far as like quality assurance, being able to use like the pop-up and just create a prod ticket, or file a bug or whatever. Just from that screen, automatically include a screenshot, include the current URL, current user information, pull a bunch of that stuff in, and use an API for GitHub or Jira or something like that, and automatically create those. And support showed you pretty good idea. This is very geared towards support, so integration with some sort of admin site. But what sort of limitations are there? Pretty much just your creativity and the web. So virtually anything is possible. So my time is up. So there is the information I had at the beginning. If you want to check that out more, so I don't think I really have time for questions. But you can come up to me if you have any. Be glad to answer them. Otherwise, thanks.